This is one of my favorite stories in the Gospels. It's not one we hear very often in church. It's one of the options for the second Sunday of Christmas, which is not a Sunday we get very often. We usually go straight to Epiphany. Today we're actually sort of celebrating Epiphanes. Half the readings are from Epiphany and half are from Christmas too. But anyway, I love this story because it kind of shows, it's one of the few stories that talks about Jesus when he's not a baby and when he's not like a grown-up person doing stuff. He's like 12-year-old Jesus, and kind of like a lot of, I guess he's a tween, not quite a teen yet, but like a lot of kids his age, he feels very, very capable, right? Like he can do anything, and so he stays behind to hide in the temple and to ask questions because he's just really interested in what's going on. And his parents don't even realize he's not with them. It's kind of like a Home Alone situation. So really bad parenting on Mary and Joseph's part here for not noticing the child was not with them. But also kind of a bad move on Jesus's part for taking off. And I love this story because there's a lot of stories in the medieval time, stories and songs about Jesus's sort of growing up. And one of my favorites that is kind of like this is Jesus is a little boy in this song, and his mother is tired of him being underfoot, so she tells him he has to go outside. I think all of us who've had children can relate to this. Like, go. And so she's like, it's time for you to go outside. And so Jesus goes down into the courtyard of the village, and he sees three other little children, a little bit older than him. He's like, does anybody want to play with me? And they're like, we're not going to play with you. You're like, a maiden son, and we're like the sons of important people. And so Jesus very sadly runs away, but he makes a bridge out of the sunbeams, and he runs over like a lake. And the little children follow after him, but they don't have a sunbeam bridge. And so they fall into the lake and they drown. Oh, no. Medieval songs are really cool. But anyway, so the three children drown. And Jesus comes home, and then the mothers of the three drowned boys come to Mary, and they're very sad, and they're like, we need to punish Jesus. And so she whips him with some branches, like 3 times. 3 is a big number, right? So she slashes him 3 times, and Jesus says that's the first tree that's getting cursed. So these stories about Jesus' childhood, they're so rare, we tend to make things up, but it reminds us that Jesus is a human being like us, right? He's growing up in the same way that we grow up. He's going through a phase as a teenager where he's kind of balking at his parents' expectations, and he wants to begin to make his own way. Now, of course, his way is a little different than most of ours. He's not dreaming of being a teacher or an engineer or a scientist, or if the children at O Road School are to believe, the ranks of professional sports players are well covered. They all want to be baseball or football stars. But here is Jesus kind of being his like normal kid self, right? And he's like, why are you guys upset with me? And can you imagine if your child disappeared, you didn't know where he was, and you had just been in some big city? Like, compared to Nazareth, going to Jerusalem is like going to New York City. Like, Nazareth had like 200 people in it. Jerusalem is a big city, and it's not like a big city by our standards, but for those people, it was massive. And he's lost somewhere in the city. I can't imagine the anxiety that they have. And he's so dismissive. So dismissive. So Jesus is human like us, and he's prone to all the failings. And what's beautiful about this is that something about us, about our lives, about our ups and our downs, and our struggles and our pains and our sorrows, because of Jesus, are part of God in a way that they never were before. That we were God's creations. But through Jesus, somehow the God and the humanity are combined in a new way that gives real meaning, I think, to our lives, to think that they are worthy of being part of whatever God is. That the sorrows that we know and the joys that we know, the pains and the triumphs of human life are worthy of God's attention. And that's really what the Epiphany and incarnation are really all about. That in the incarnation, we are reminded that our lives are worthwhile enough for God to come down and pay attention to us and to be among us as one of us. And the Epiphany reminds us that the whole world needs to know this story about Jesus, about what Jesus has done and about what it means for us and for our lives. That Jesus gives meaning and purpose and frees us. This is the important part, I think, frees us to be people who are willing to love, to be people who are willing to walk the extra mile, to be people willing to see things from another's perspective. That we don't have to live within our fears and our anxieties. That we can set those aside and be the people we were created to be, to work with God, who we are now a part of, in building the kingdom of God here on earth, which will be culminated when Jesus returns to us. But we are not called to be passive and to wait, to be active and engaged in the work of reconciliation and salvation ourselves. That now, because of Jesus, we are joined with God in this venture of salvation together. We have a part to play, and that we should not lose heart or courage, but be fearless and bold in the way that we love in the world.